feedback. What's up, everybody? It's Bryan from the Security Squawk podcast. I'm here with Reginald Andre from a top secret location who's going to mute his mic because I think we're getting his feedback.
I don't know. That reverb was pretty sweet on the end.
I don't know. It's like the remix. Ryan Harris from Sphinx Cybersecurity and Randy Bryan from Tech Rescue. Welcome to the show, gentlemen. Another free-for-all where we talk about cybersecurity and whatever else we want to talk about. To help educate you, let me mute my phone, about all the threats out there and what you can start doing to protect yourself. So we don't annoy you with ads and all that stuff. So we're just going to kind of let you know what our fee for the show is. Rye, what's the fee for the show?
The fee for the show is to like, subscribe, and share. The important thing is just sharing this out. One of the biggest struggles we have within cybersecurity is just getting people to understand how serious it is and that it is bad out there and you need to protect yourself and your business. So share this with anybody that you know that may be a decision maker, business leader, a business owner. They need to know this information so they can make the proper business decision for themselves.
That's right. We don't give up our precious, valuable time to bring you this information for you not to pay the fee. So pay the fee. We don't annoy you with ads or commercials or any of that shit. We just ask you to share our stuff. And that's all. So, guys, we're going to talk about quite a few topics today. It's going to almost be like rapid fire to try to get this in 40, 45 minutes or so. But we got to talk about this exploit, this vulnerability that's running rampant right now. There's no patch for it. It is a 0 day, but it's like day 10 of 0 day. Microsoft, known as Follina, it is a vulnerability. It's being exploited, as I mentioned. We're going to get into that and let everybody kind of know at a high level what it is and what you probably shouldn't be doing on your computer right now, because if you do, you're going to end up potentially getting this thing. And the scary thing about it is it's one of those things that like can just happen without much clicking or much like letting things in like you're used to. Like, yes, I want to allow this. Well, that doesn't really happen with this. So stay tuned. Costa Rica, they're in it a couple different ways right now. I mean, they're kind of being used as a pawn by cybersecurity groups, which is wild if you think about it, that a private criminal group is basically able to troll. So we're going to get into that. There's a city over in Italy that's also dealing with a major cyber attack. So we're going to kind of talk about could this start creeping into the U.S. where major cities are dealing with ransomware attacks? And then we got a retreat, I guess, if you want to call it that, where cyber criminals are starting to realize that maybe ransomware is not the best route to go. So we're going to let you know what they're thinking about changing to, which really they've been doing all along. It's just that people just don't think about it like ransomware. Ransomware is like more exciting or sexier than, some other things that cyber criminals do that are actually more lucrative and they make more money off of. So we're going to fill you in on that. And then we got this QBot. What is this, Ryan? Help me out here. The QBot's like, it's kind of like TrickBot, right? Am I right?
It's basically a story about different groups kind of merging together, combining forces to be able to spread this even faster.
Right. So it's kind of like a new flavor of TrickBot, automated way to kind of hack your systems and get the tools that these guys need on, kind of like auto dialers for cyber criminals. So we're going to talk about that. And then we're going to talk about some interesting statistics from the healthcare industry and how much of a target and how bad of a job you're doing at cybersecurity. So if you're in healthcare, stick around or fast forward to the end of the show because you're going to want to hear some of this stuff. All right. So let's get right into it, guys. Follina, as it's pronounced, right? Major issue for Microsoft, I have to say. I'll chime in if you guys don't fill in the kind of the nitty-gritty details of kind of what I know. But at the end of the day, let's start educating people on what this is. So at a high level, why should I be worried about this particular vulnerability? So it is a 0 day. If you don't know what a 0 day is, it means that somebody figured out a vulnerability that hasn't been fixed yet. So Microsoft is now scrambling to put together a patch And that's really kind of where I'll kind of leave it to the rest of the guys to talk about what the hell this thing is. So first off, how can I get this virus? If I'm a user sitting in front of my computer, how do I know that what should I not be doing, or what should I be looking out for?
Well, I mean, it's not really a virus per se, as much as a vulnerability in one of Microsoft's tools. And from a super high level, basically this vulnerability, if they, and it's there, so if they're able to access it, then they're able to take on the privileges of whatever app they use to access it. So if you're running,
before we go there, like,
yes, sir,
I'm a user.
Okay.
How is this going to be presented to me? What do I need to be looking for? Go back to, that's already after I did everything and clicked on stuff that you're talking about.
I mean,
how am I going to get this? Like, is it coming through my email? Am I getting it through a social media link? Like, what the hell should I be looking for?
I mean, it's a vulnerability in Microsoft Office. So if you have Office, you have the vulnerability.
Correct. So two things have to be true, right? You have to be on a Windows computer, because this does not affect Mac OS, right? So we don't want to alarm Mac OS users that have Office on their computer. And you're still safe today. That doesn't mean you're safe forever. Second thing, you have to have Office, right? So Windows Office on a Windows system, and you can get an email. Right.
That's number one way right there.
Usually it's coming through an email, but it can come through different ways, right? You could, if you're doing random Google searches and you're going to websites you don't know about, somebody could implant one of these files right on there. Depending on your settings on your system, Office may or may not block this because it's being downloaded from the internet. Office tends to do a good job with blocking things that are downloaded off the internet. It doesn't do the same thing for things that come through your email. So, it doesn't really put a block on these files when you download an attachment through Outlook. And sometimes users just go and turn these types of settings off because they're annoying to them. So your machine could potentially not block stuff that you could download from the internet. So it really doesn't matter how this comes in. Cyber criminals are massively upticking their phishing attempts right now. There's massive amounts of phishing emails going out there with links to or attachments, right? So it doesn't have to necessarily be an attachment on the email. It could be a link that goes to a website that contains the attachment, or gets you to, open the file in a certain way. So what else do we know about this? Like, certain things, one of the things that I know about this virus or this vulnerability is that a user doesn't have to do much. So what are some things that, could be present on a system that people should maybe be disabling today or looking out for, so they don't become a victim of this?
I mean, there's definitely some workarounds that have been posted to kind of block the access to the vulnerability in this situation. A lot of the tools that we use within security have been updated to look for this type of thing and stop this stuff. To me, this is ultimately a situation of having good hygiene. We talk about the end user kind of being the most risky part of the equation in most cases. Not opening or downloading documents that are coming from places that you aren't aware of, or the trusted sources is really the number one way to kind of stop and curb this right off the bat.
So the other thing that I found interesting about this particular vulnerability is that I think a lot of users or a lot of people out there are used to, like, in order for something bad to happen on their system, they kind of have to give it permission. They have to, like, that box pops up saying, do you really want to do this? And the user either clicks yes or no. Most people just click yes because they want to open the file, or they want to, see what their friend sent them or whatever, right? So the interesting thing with this particular one is that none of that has to happen. Mm-hmm. They just need to get this file onto your computer. And there's a couple ways that this can happen without you really having to do much. Number one, if you use that preview pane in Outlook or File Explorer, that can trigger this vulnerability without you needing to do anything at all. And you just need to have that file opened up. So what does that mean, right? What does that look like? If you're a user of Outlook, You have your normal email that pops up on the right hand side in your preview pane or wherever you have it. Maybe you still have it down below, like old school. And as soon as you click on view attachment, right, that attachment opens up in that preview pane as well. And that's just the same as opening up that file by double clicking on it. Same thing in File Explorer. A lot of people like to click on the file and see that preview pop up on the right of the file. It does the same thing. It literally opens the file in that preview pane without you having to double click on it. And that's the big deal, in my opinion, with this vulnerability, is that it's so easy for a user to make this thing run, by simply just disabling these two things on your system for a little while until there's a patch is a really smart move, in my opinion. I don't know if you guys read that or saw that, but that's kind of what I took from it. And then we can kind of jump into some of the workarounds that they mentioned, because I kind of want to take issue with that too. So anything else you guys want to add to, what I just threw in there?
I think that's a good point, because I think a lot of people assume that using the preview feature for a document is a way of testing it to see if there's anything bad, taking a look and see if it looks good.
That's true.
In this case, it's just the same as opening it. So
yeah, and a lot of people don't have that awareness, and you're 100% right that people do use that preview pane to like kind of determine what the heck that file is, but really is no different than opening it up and double clicking on it. So again, the scarier thing, you don't have to give permission, you don't have to put in an admin password. You don't have to give it elevated rights, UAL, say, yes, I want to run this. I want to allow this. This thing just happens. And the hackers have figured out a way to basically inject a lot of garbage into a legitimate command that then confuses the system and allows the attacker to then take control of it. So it's really interesting.
In the book.
It is one of the oldest tricks in the book, but it is interesting how they kind of figured this out. Like, you can run this particular this exploit without all the garbage code, and it won't run.
Right.
The big requirement of this from a technical standpoint, and I know we're not trying to go there on this show, but the really interesting thing to me is that this works when you dump in the garbage information into the system and overwhelm it, right, with more data than it's programmed to consume. And then that opens the system up to a vulnerability. Guys, this is exactly why zero trust is important and why it needs to be implemented, because you have things like this where the systems can be tricked and confused into doing and manipulated into doing things that they're not designed to do. And there's cyber criminals all over the world every day trying to figure out ways to make things like this happen, make Windows operate in a way that it wasn't designed, or an engineer didn't fully expect that somebody would actually do that. Like shove, hundreds of lines of code that are just A's, the letter A, to basically inject that into, a normal part of the computer processing. And when somebody did that, they figured out that they were able to then, trick the system, confuse it, and basically get God mode of the system. That's literally what's going on here. So, go ahead.
Oh yeah, and the scary part is wait till this mutates when they're starting to send legit files, like files you're expecting from a supplier or customer that has that document. And now you're opening it and you're looking at something that's legit, and it's got some code in the back that's now spreading through your systems.
It's a great point, Andre, because you highlight there the fact that every day that this goes by, I would venture to say that hundreds of businesses are being attacked without their knowledge. They have what we call advanced persistent threats gaining a foothold on their systems every single day. And that's all they care about right now. Get access to as many networks as we can while this thing's still going, right? And then there's going to be people that come out and patch this thing early on. And there's going to be people that never patch for this thing, right? So they're going to be able to, after the patch comes out with this thing, they're going to be able to continue to exploit it. It's going to be one of the things that the FBI adds to their list in the next couple months for known exploits that are actively being exploited by cyber criminals. It's going to be built into TrickBot, QBot, Cobalt Blue. It's going to be built into all that stuff, right? So to detect it and then automate the ability to exploit it right on the spot. And, right now is the name of the game. Get as much territory as we can while we can. And then once we have access, when we create other backdoors for ourselves so we can get in other ways. And then, once they realize that the game of getting access using this vulnerability is over, then that's when we're going to start seeing a bit more business email compromise, more ransomware happening. And that's how this is going to play out. So real quick, I want to jump into kind of the workarounds that Microsoft has suggested around this, right? Because we don't have a patch. Here's some things you can do to kind of prevent this stuff. But, I'm not going to kind of spoil the well too much here. But in my initial look at what they're recommending, I just, we have two jobs here. We have to secure the network, but we also have to keep businesses running. And and our clients, don't want us putting things out there that are going to hinder their ability to do business, right? To make software applications not work, not talk to one another. And the workarounds that Microsoft is suggesting kind of, put you in that situation where you got to figure out, if I apply this, will, my environment's applications continue to operate like all the employees expect. We personally here, we've decided that we're not going to follow Microsoft's recommendations because there's just not enough of a testing environment and enough time to test this stuff to determine whether if we do this, is it going to break something else? It's just not a feasible way to get around this problem. So we're not taking any of the Microsoft recommendations, but we are building in our own precautions, disabling the preview, putting in rules around zero trust, things like that are protecting our clients. So I don't know. That's kind of was my initial take when I first saw what they wanted us to do. I was like, we're going to tackle this our own way. I don't know how you guys handled it in your company, but that's kind of how we looked at it.
Yeah, the suggestions Microsoft said to do in the registry and things like that, we're not going to be touching. We're going to be operating the zero trust model, and that should take care of it.
Yep. Same here. It reminds me of the print vulnerability from last year where, the Microsoft solution was basically to make your, a major functionality of your computer useless.
Right. That's the exact same thing I was thinking.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, there is, this write up by Microsoft on what to do, but it's like it's going to be at the detriment of being able to do business, and your employees are going to be annoyed. And the last thing we want to do is we don't want to annoy the people that we support and serve, right? And we're trying to do this the smart way. And that's kind of where things are at right now. So we'll update everybody next week. Hopefully there'll be a patch out next week. Maybe. I don't know.
I think the important thing here, though, is too, this to me highlights the importance of having IT within your business. The Microsoft advisement is really what you would have to do if you didn't have other tools like zero trust and things, in your environment. That's your only option then, is to disable that kind of stuff. So if you want to have a business and keep it protected and be able to function, that's why you need IT, who can make those decisions, who have those tools, and can come up with a solution that solves both problems, not just shuts things down until a fix is found.
Yep. So just a quick heads up, guys. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. I'm going to just talk about the Costa Rica government held up by ransomware again, and then we'll jump into a bigger discussion on what could actually be happening with this. So this happens, guys, and this just isn't. And what I'm talking about here is the Costa Rican government was held up by ransomware again, by the Hive ransomware group, after they got hit by Conti roughly 3 weeks ago. And the important thing is that as business people, you should understand that when your company gets hit, don't think that other ransomware groups aren't turning their sights on your company, thinking that you're an easy target, right? If one company was able to get in, another company was able to get in. The other thing we really haven't seen, and when I saw this is kind of a thought that crossed my mind. We talk about this ransomware as a service where, they're outsourcing the people that break into the networks, right? So what's to stop if I'm that guy, right? If I have a business and I'm really good at breaking into people's networks, and then I reach out to ransomware groups and sell my services, what's to stop me from selling my services to multiple ransomware groups, right? So I can get into various networks, but maybe I give you access to 30% of what I have access to. I give to one group, and then I give another group the other 30%, another group another 30%. That is a real threat. That is a real thing that I don't think people are really talking about yet. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's what happened here. I don't think this was a reinfection of the same network. I think the same group knew how to get into certain systems of this government, and when they got access to another area, they sold it to a different ransomware group. What do you guys think about that?
Absolutely, and I think there's another angle here too is something that we see a lot where a smaller business gets hit and they don't do the proper forensics and incident response to where they get things back up and running, but they haven't actually cleaned out the attacker in the first place. So that attacker is still there with a foothold, and then can easily, like you said, sell this to sell that access to somebody else. And that's why we see the percentage of companies getting hit for a second time, it jumps up. If you've been hit a first time, you're much more likely to get hit a second time. I
think it's like 80%.
Yeah.
So High's asking for $5 million in Bitcoin to unlock the infected systems.
I did.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I said I did the conversion. I don't know if they just mean 5 million in Bitcoin or $5 million.
$5 million in Bitcoin. Yeah, $5 million in Bitcoin. They want
They
want the money obviously paid in Bitcoin.
Yeah.
But the last kind of, and I really didn't read this article before I made my comments. The last paragraph here. Hive and Conti weren't known to be acting together in any way, but MSoft ransomware analyst Brett Callow told the AP that there was probably someone coordinating between the two groups, and that someone is an advanced persistent threat person who knows how to get into people's systems, and he's selling the access that he has to different groups, making as much profit as he can for his efforts, because quite frankly, it's probably the hardest part of the whole deal is getting into somebody's network. Once somebody's in there, it's easy to deploy the ransomware. So let's just keep talking about Costa Rica. Andre, I'm going to bounce this one off you to start. So they are basically, there's this kind of chatter out there that this Costa Rica attack was a farce for Conti to kind of move and rebrand. What the hell does that even mean? And like, what's going on here?
Yeah, so my understanding is Conti is related to the Russian, Russia, and they're trying to obviously disassociate themselves with Russia as far as any type of payments and things like that. And so now they're using a different name. I don't know how true that is. Kind of to what you said, it's just possible that they just sold it to different people using the different things. But that's what I know about it.
So, I mean, it's interesting because I think we did touch on this a little bit in the last show last week, but the whole ransomware group rebranding thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, I thought we talked about it, but the whole ransomware group rebranding thing has kind of been a modus operandi for these groups the last couple of years. And they need to change, and they need to move and hide and move around. Otherwise, they're going to get caught, right? It's like being a sitting duck almost if they don't do this stuff. And it's too easy for, I think they realized a couple of years ago, it's too easy for the feds, especially the United States government, to track these guys down if they don't move around, both digitally and physically, right? So not only are they moving, Bitcoin wallets and servers and places that they operate from, in terms of their infrastructure, but they're also physically moving throughout, Europe and Russia to basically hide from authorities and figure out where they're working from and where they're operating from. So what do you guys think? I mean, do you think that that's really what's going on here? Do you think it's just kind of like I mean, I personally think it's a coincidence that they hit Costa Rica and then they did this. It wasn't a cause and effect type of thing. This would have been done around this time anyway, because, Conti's been on fire since December, in my opinion, probably a little bit even before that, probably since last October. So 6-8 months of being one of the most prolific ransomware groups out there, doesn't bode well for not, staying under the radar, not getting caught. So I just think it's coincidence. I don't think it has anything to do with the Costa Rica thing being kind of like a smoke screen for them to do this. It would have happened anyway. Ryan, you're muted. Go ahead.
Putting being big like that puts a big target on your back too.
Huge.
So part of the rebranding and breaking off into separate chunks is, instead of having one giant organization with a big target on its back, you've got a bunch of little ones, which makes it harder to track. And you tend to lose focus when you've got, 20 of them to go after as opposed to 1 or 2.
Yeah. So I remember last week we talked about a town in New Jersey, Somerset, that got hit. And it's interesting to me that all these state, local, city, countries, these governments are getting hit. And I can only look at that as an outside observer and say that, a lot of these governments are not doing enough. And these cyber criminals know it. These cyber criminals, they know when they know they have a soft target, they go after. It's no different in anybody's businesses. When you have a good revenue stream, there's an industry that needs your services, it's only smart that you continue to go to other similar businesses in that industry to sell your services. And it's no different with cyber criminals. They know when they start hitting cities and states and towns that a lot of these governments are doing things the same way, which means you're making it easy for them. So it's not a U.S. problem. It's a world problem. And it seems like to me, especially with governments, that this is very, very reactionary, that they're not very proactive when it comes to cybersecurity. And I get it, because they run off taxes and they have to justify spending this money on these things to their constituents. And I think that that's where the kind of, quandary comes in, is because, if you're a town that's never been hit, maybe the town hasn't even been hit 1,000 miles around you, right? Like in my town, we can point to a county that's one county above us to say, like, look what just happened to them, right? Not everywhere can do that. Not everywhere can point to a close, town or relate it to where it hits home, to where people are going to be saying, yeah, that's a good use of our tax dollars to go spend that much money on cybersecurity. And unfortunately, I think the way it manifests itself and when you get more buy-in, when you actually get attacked. We saw it, I think of Baltimore County in Maryland, the amount of money that they're investing in cybersecurity now, versus when you look at prior to their ransomware attack. They did a horrible job at cybersecurity. They had very little budget dedicated to it. Now they're spending millions of dollars shoring up their cyber defenses because they don't want a repeat of what happened in their county. So, here we go again. And Andre and me, or you and I, are kind of taking this one on. So can you give the viewers the details here of what's going on in Palermo, Italy? How were they hit? Who hit them? Do we know any of that stuff?
Yeah, so Palermo is the 5th largest city in Italy. They have about 1.3 million people, and they get a lot of tourists. So keyword tourists, they're getting a lot of dollars coming in there. So kind of what you were saying, Bryan, I don't know, it's kind of an excuse at this point for a lot of these places. It's kind of like you get hit and then now you want to spend a lot of money. It's like, if you're getting the money, you need to spend the money on the security. So as we start to see even more of these cities kind of get hit, like even today, I was thinking about when I was going through the immigration of where I'm passing through right now for my vacation. and they still have Windows 7 computers at the immigration center. Like, come on. Like, at some point, it's got to be, it's your fault. So anyways, sidetrack, but back to the back to this here. So
Randy, there's
down,
U.S. government, there's U.S. state governments that still have Windows 7 computers.
Wow.
Last time I was at the hospital, they had I think it was an XP computer that was running.
Oh boy.
Wow.
But anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so we have so yeah, they're basically been down for three days. Anything that relies on their the technology is down. So we're talking about their police operations, all their municipality services. They're going back to the fax machine to be able to communicate, and all of the government services for museums, theaters, reservations, sports facilities, everything is shut down. Yep.
That's a great, it's great that you pointed that out, because it's one thing I will say, for at least in the U.S. and the attacks that I've studied, at least we're not giving them the Holy Grail like these other countries like Costa Rica and now the city of Palermo. I mean, to have the systems you mentioned attacked along with the police, at least when I see the ones in the U.S., the police aren't getting attacked along with like the municipal government. It's usually like one side of the house versus the other. Not to say police departments don't get attacked, but it seems like we've done a good enough job of segregating things, probably more so from a business standpoint than a cybersecurity standpoint. But it's at least gives me a little bit of comfort to know that we don't see massive attacks in the United States where they wipe out everything all in one shot. It's just a little difference I've observed between what happens here versus what might happen in other countries. So just a warning to kind of everybody to learn from this, right? Learn that you need to do a better job of segregating your business interests. So, again, like I say all the time, if your marketing person opens an email and clicks on something, that shouldn't take down your operations, right? And you should be setting up your networks in a way where, if marketing person does click on something and does something bad, it only affects the marketing department, not the whole entire company. Anyone else want to add anything on that?
I would just definitely agree with what you said there. I mean, the goal, I always use the analogy. We want the bad guys to feel like they're running in chest high mud. So they get into the network. We want to do everything we can to slow them down, make it not fun, not interesting, not easy to move around in the network. That way, you make yourself also a less tasty of a target, if you will, by doing those things.
Right, and they're all tasty right now because they don't do those things. So it's
right.
They're tasty, and they're very successful. Well, so I don't know, it's wild. So Randy, we're gonna jump into this ransomware return on investment retreat, and basically, at a high level, I'm going to introduce kind of the topic, and you can go into details. But what we're kind of going to talk about here is and this is no different what we talked about for years on this chat, on this podcast, is ransomware, because of the focus of cyber defenders and a lot of people is on ransomware. Ransomware is going to become less attractive to cyber criminals. And I've been saying this, and we've known this for a long time. That's not going to stop cyber criminal activity. That's not going to stop cyber crime if ransomware goes away, because there's plenty of other ways that these guys can make money. And Randy's going to educate us on that a little bit today. So what are some ways ransomware groups or cyber criminals can make money outside of deploying ransomware?
Yeah, so this is a really, really interesting article. Like you just said, because of crackdowns and things like that, it's getting harder to get a great return on investment for ransomware. And so what we're seeing is a shift towards BEC attacks. That's what the cool kids call business email compromise attacks. Basically attacks that initiate with an email, but it's not like it's just they send you an email and you click on it. I'm going to go into that just a little bit here in just a second, but it's a lot more complex than that. And it's really a huge vulnerability. And, it doesn't make the news a lot, but these attacks actually get about $1 out of $3 that are taken in cyber crimes. So they're actually very prominent as it is, but it really looks like it's going to really crest up here, a trend up in the coming months, especially. So it's crazy. The number one BEC email attack still to this day is gift cards. You get an email from your boss who says, I'm in Cancun for the afternoon. I lost my wallet. Can you go to Palais Royal and give me a $500 gift card? Because we all know there aren't any of those in Cancun, but somebody down here is taking them, blah, blah, blah. And people fall for it. And the thing is, as long as people still fall for those things, we're going to still see them as being a popular form of attack. But what's really up and coming right now takes it to a whole nother level where they post as external business contacts, which we've seen that. We've seen that they're taking over old domains. We had a whole show about that, using an old domain that's somehow they got a hold of that's considered safe, and then they reach out. But what they're doing is impersonating themselves as business email contacts. They get into the network. We talk about this all the time. They get in and they just start gathering intelligence. And then they learn how you do your direct deposits. They learn how you do your invoices. They get a hold of your aging reports and find out who owes you money that they can reach out to and pretend to be you. And they build this evidence. And then next thing you know, they start acting on it, and they start doing things like getting direct deposits, getting people to pay to their account, even though they're acting like they're you. This takes a lot more. Here's my thing, why I think it's now cresting, because I think it takes a lot more interaction from people. It takes a lot more interaction from people. It's not all automated. It's kind of an art. People have to be involved in here to gather the intelligence, to build the profile, to make those decisions. But the other ROIs going down on ransomware, and so it's going to push people in. You always can just say, where's the money? You follow the money, that's where the criminals are going to be. But that's basically the gist of what this article's talking about.
Well, it's also because they're refining their tactics over time to go undetected on the network for long periods of time, or long enough to where they can collect the information. And that's just the name of the game. Their ability, their R&D is improving and evolving, and they're looking for ways that they can use other tools because they know the days of ransomware are numbered. Now, I'm not saying ransomware is going away, anytime soon, but the writing's on the wall that, this problem is going to get, pretty well tamped down, as, there are companies that are being injected with venture capitalist money like crazy to sell tools and things that prevent ransomware. So this is a big market. This is a big thing. And the more that happens, the harder it's going to be. So these guys have to figure out other ways to make money. Crypto mining is another way that they're going to make money down the road where, without your knowledge, they're mining cryptocurrency, things like that. Right. So anything you guys want to add, Randy? Thank you. You did a great job of kind of detailing every nook and cranny of that whole situation there. I don't have too much to add. You guys have anything you want to add before we move on? Cool. So, Ryan, QBot. What's QBot? I touched on it a little bit at the beginning, but let's what is QBot, and what are they doing, and why are we talking about them?
So QBot and the typical malware that they spread is used to steal bank credentials typically. And our good friends Black Basta have now teamed up with QBot. And QBot is not, they've teamed up with other groups in the past.
Mhm.
This is kind of the scary situation where, one cyber criminal group acting alone is bad enough, but when you get these guys teaming up, and I think that's one of the other disadvantages to them breaking up into these smaller groups is now they're all kind of working together. So we, instead of having a couple big groups that are all operating independently, now we've got hundreds of smaller groups that are all working together. So in this story, it talks a lot about how QBot is getting in and doing their thing, but then they are now working with Black Basta to spread then laterally through the network using the combination of the two tools that they use, and it's just getting really scary out there with
Right. I think a lot of people look at technology, and this is the perspective I kind of want to give people. People look at technology as like a one attribute or one kind of sport, thing, and it's not. It's being able to successfully achieve this stuff doesn't mean, to use an analogy with sports. Usually, you got to be good at baseball. You got to be good at there's very few people that are good at everything, right? That are good at, Bo Jackson tried it. Michael Jordan failed at it, where they tried to be good at professionals at two different sports. And that's kind of the world we live in now. You're not going to be good at getting into networks and breaking into networks and be good at writing code that deploys ransomware and stuff like that. So, but I think the world has a perception that all IT guys are good at everything IT. And that's not the world we live in anymore. That's 1999 shit, right? Where you could hire one guy to run everything. In a similar sense that cyber defenders and companies need to be hiring people with different skill sets. Your CIO is really good at making the car run fast, but he's not making sure that everybody gets inside the car, gets to their destination safely. That's what cybersecurity people do. Right. And it's two different skill sets. It's two different personality styles. You're not going to get somebody who's good at creating networks and building infrastructure and writing code. They're not going to be good at making sure that process is being followed, that steps are being followed, that things are being properly buttoned up after, the guy goes in there and tries to figure out what the problem is with the firewall or whatever. You know what I mean? You got to have somebody going in behind them and saying, did he flick off all the switches that he was flicking on and off as he was trying to fix this problem, right? That's a lot of times where we find problems. We find that, the shooting guard or the guard comes in and he's really good at passing the ball, but he's not so good at rebounding, right? And then you need a guy that's good at rebounding to come in and make sure that that's getting done. And that's what cybersecurity and this world that we live in is. And cyber criminals are ahead of the game in most businesses in figuring this out, right? That we're not great at doing this. Let's hire somebody who is so we can get it done quicker, faster, better, right? And we'll do what we're good at, which is, get the ransomware on the system, negotiate, and get paid. So I don't know if you guys have anything else you want to add to this, but again, it's scary to me that they're building tools to automate all this.
Well, on top of the having specialties, I mean, vulnerabilities aren't easy to find. And then once you find one that you can use to do something bad like this, it's really valuable at that point. So these groups are they have their own vulnerabilities. And so in this case, QBot has a vulnerability that they use to get into the system. And then Black Basta takes over and uses that, their vulnerability to move laterally. So when they combine all of these things, it just gets really scary really fast.
And the $1 million question that I want to ask, like CEOs out there and people in charge of their companies, IT, and maybe cybersecurity, but the people in charge of the IT specifically, like, what are you doing to automate finding this stuff on your network? Because the cyber criminals already have the tools in place that once they break in, they're automating the process of finding how they can move laterally, as Ryan explained, and get into your network even deeper. What are you doing from an automated standpoint to check your network? Because I guarantee you, most companies out there don't even know that these tools exist that automate the ability to find vulnerabilities within your network. And it's a hell of a lot easier for you to find it because you have the credentials. You have the ability to type in the right credentials so we can discover this stuff. Cyber criminals have to figure it out, right? And they are figuring it out. They're very successful at what they do. So Anything else you guys want to add? We're good. So last one, Andre. Healthcare attacks increased 94%, or what? I don't know what the time frame is of that, but that's kind of what we want to talk about. We talk about governments. We've talked about colleges and universities lately. About 5 minutes we'll spend on this because I got to bounce. But healthcare ransomware attacks increased by 94% in 2021. What's happening here?
Yeah, so I'll go over some statistics, and I guess we can use the final minutes just to talk about it. But this was a global survey of about 5,600 IT professionals, 34 countries. And some interesting one says 66% of surveyed healthcare organizations said they had experienced a ransomware attack in 2021. 61% of healthcare organizations that suffered a ransomware attack paid the ransom. And then on average, after paying the ransom, they were only able to recover 65% of the encrypted data. And lastly, on average, the ransomware payment was about $197,000. So my first thing is, if 66% of healthcare organizations say they experience a ransomware attack, I mean, if 66% of our customers got a ransomware attack, we're out of business. No one's trusting us anymore. So like that was like the biggest thing that went for me was about that this is happening at such a big, you would think 3%, 5%, 10%, 66%, 6 out of 10 hospitals basically got attacked.
So those of you who have the attitude that this is why I have cyber insurance and I don't need guys like us to help them with any of this stuff, just buy cyber insurance and kind of do the basics, get some endpoint protection and maybe some MFA, right? But the data's in. They've been looking at this for years now. The ability to get all of your data back has just decreased by 4% according to this data. So when paying the ransom, they were able to get about 70%, which sucks. Think about if your business got hit with ransomware, and at the end of the day, once you paid the ransom, you were still going to lose 30% of your data. That's what this information is telling you. Now that's up 4% to 65%. So now you're even getting less data back today, right? So that, we know this, guys. We know Russian cyber criminals aren't that smart. They're not. People might think that they're super geniuses. They have the wrong idea about these guys. They're not that smart. Number two, they write sloppy code because their code can't even decrypt most of the data that they encrypt in the first place. And I'm going to stop talking because the other one that I want you guys to kind of rap about is in 2020, 8% of healthcare organizations recovered all of their data after paying the ransom. 8%. That was in 2020. That figure fell to just 2% in 2021. So only 2% of the healthcare organizations got all of their data back after they paid the ransom. So, I mean, this is right of boom stuff. This is after the attack. And that's kind of what I want to focus on at the end of the show here, guys. It's like, it's very expensive and there's no guarantees on the other side of this. And I think that's a misperception that a lot of people have, that if I have insurance, I pay this ransomware, I'm going to get all my stuff back. I'm going to be back up and running in a couple of days.
I think the other thing here too is another thing that we hear is, oh, I've got backup, so I'm good. If that many of them paid the ransom, you're not paying the ransom if you had a good backup either.
That's the first thing they go for.
Yeah.
And it's not even if you have good backups.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to air gap them. You got to keep them away from the hands of the cyber criminals, right? I could be on your network for 200 days before I deploy your ransomware, and the whole time I could be fucking with your backups to make sure that when you go to try to recover those backups, that it's not successful.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that you have all the latest and greatest ones with the screenshots that come automatic and that tells you you're good. Unless you physically have somebody try to test restore that, you really have no idea. Those screenshots, yes, while they're effective, if you're relying on those as your sole reason for saying that you have good backups, you're swallowing a sugar pill. Is that it? I'm dropping the mic. We're done.
I mean, you're right on there.
Yeah. So that's it. That's the reality. That's the lesson learned for today. If you're in healthcare and you're not doing full test restores, and you're not at the point where your disaster recovery and your incident response involves, actually spinning up a image in that server in the environment you say you're going to recover to, and testing it out and seeing that the mouse moves and we can access all the applications, that's where you need to get to. And I know most businesses are not doing that. Most businesses are relying on their MSP to tell them that data backup fired up a screenshot and we're good to go. We got the report. It's right here. Don't rely on that. It's not good enough. It's a good step in the right direction, but it's not good enough, right? So elevate your game and don't become, part of the statistics that we just read out, because the numbers are bleak.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, 2%. Holy God, that's like as much fat that's in the milk I drink. Randy, I thought you'd laugh at that one. It wasn't. All right, boys. I appreciate the input. Thank you so much. I got to go bounce to a compliance meeting, talk about cybersecurity compliance. So, see y'all guys in the next episode. And remember, share our show. If you made it this far, you're a huge fan. Give us a review on your favorite podcasting platform, or just throw some comments on social media. We love to hear from you. So take care, everyone. See you in the next episode.
All right. Bye-bye.